Good evening from the Wilson County Historical Museum. This is Leanne Githens, and it is third Wednesday Museum After Hours. And today we're going to talk about Christmas. Now, I'm fully aware that we have the Thanksgiving holiday coming up next week, and I'm not trying to leapfrog over that, but it's very possible that we won't be hosting the third Wednesday Museum After Hours in December. So I thought it would be a great time to look at some of the Christmas decorations from years gone past that we have, and also to share some of the Christmas memories that we have in our collection. So first of all, let's take a look at some of the Christmas decorations. Now this one is, some of you may recognize as being displayed in the Union Gas Company window when the Union Gas Company was located on the south side of the square in the 1940s. So I realize that's quite a long while ago. The Union Gas Company was located on the south side of the square at one time. More of you may remember it being on the west side of the square at the north end of the block. But I think this nativity display was there for quite a long while. It is showing some evidence of wear, but we are thrilled to have it as part of our collection. We also have some Santas, and they are kind of they're historic. This one to me looks kind of spooky. Looks a little angry, but he does come with a kind of a village scene that is all sparkly, so that's kind of fun. This is a paper mache Santa that is in our collection. And another one, a little bit taller, St. Nicholas. This might be a good time to mention that the museum does have Christmas gifts for sale. We do have a collection of mugs. We have a couple of designs of Christmas ornaments. So stop by sometime and shop. We'll be doing... I'll be doing a post sometime, probably next week, about the items that we do have for sale, but keep us in mind when you're thinking about your Christmas shopping and your Christmas giving. But now I'd like to talk about some Christmas memories of long ago from Wilson County. These all are items that were posted that were actually in the yesteryears from, I think they were published in the 1970s, early 1970 or 71. So these are memories from people who may have been born about the turn of the century. Some of these memories go back as far as 1910, 1900. Some of the names, some of you older people may recognize. The first narrative I'd like to share with you is by Hazel Hess Youngmeyer. And some of you will remember that she was affectionately known as Auntie Hazel and taught kindergarten in her home. So here is her recollection. The year is 1900. The place, the Sam Hess residence in Marshall, Missouri. Typical Christmas weather, snow, cold, and exciting. We had a huge tree that reached the ceiling. The decorations were beautiful, and many, including ropes of cranberries and popcorn and typical baubles. The gifts were piled under the tree, and small ones were on the tree. Of course, we didn't see anything until after breakfast, and then the grand opening. Our dinner consisted of roast turkey, chestnut dressing with all the fixing, and pumpkin pie and mincemeat pies. In the afternoon, we went for a sleigh ride in the country. Our team, Bill and Doc, pulling the sleigh, a large wagon bed filled with straw, and when we got back, we had mulled cider and cookies. Then a tired bunch went off to bed. I especially remember this Christmas because I received a small red chair, which I sat on and tipped back, like the big men. I wasn't as big as I thought. I fell backwards and hit my head on the fender of the base burner and carried a scar from the cut to this day. And wouldn't we just love to ask her to show that to us? Well, the next narrative that I'd like to share with you is from the man that turned out to be, eventually was her husband, John Youngmeyer, and it is entitled, I Remember. It starts with a little poem. How dear to my heart are the scenes of my childhood when fond recollections present them to view. That verse has a world of sorrow and pleasure embedded in it. I have been asked to describe the Christmas spirit as well as the Christmas seasons that I have lived. Christmas in the late 80s and gay 90s, as they are now known, were in fact just that. And he's not talking about 1980 or 1990. The Christmas spirit began the first Monday after Thanksgiving. The stores all kept open till 9 o'clock so people could browse around and get ready to buy later. Of course, there were some buyers, and they became more numerous as the holiday approached. Many articles were on the market. A few of the most common were pocket knives, single-barrel shotguns and ammo, coal oil lamps and coal oil stand lamps with fancy shades, cut-glass celery dishes, candy jars, sugar and creamers, jelly dishes, pepper and salters, and the most elaborate punch bowls, dress goods, parasols, walking canes, fancy hair ribbons, watch chains, watch charms, sterling matchboxes, cigar end cutters, cuff buttons, and stick pins for the tie. I've mentioned just a few items, many more than you have today. I was born in a 3-store business block, which my people owned just off the courthouse square, now part of a large department store. But at an early age, about 4, my folks built a large 12-room home on a tract of land just inside the city limits. There we moved, 4 sisters and 1 brother. My, what good times we had with 2 cows, a horse, and an ornery billy goat. That animal was the life of the party until one day I tied a cord from his horns to his tail and then rubbed his nose with pepper. He ceased to be a friend of mine from that day. In late October, we would receive from some farmer friend 2 large young geese. These were penned up and fed with grain, stale bread, and milk. By Thanksgiving, one would be on the table and the other for Christmas. And my, what a fine flavor was that meat. Try that sometime if you really want something to remember. We were told that Santa had a lot of angels working for him all the time, and they would be around to peep in the windows at night to see if the young ones were behaving. If not, they would be warned about the 10th of December by not receiving on St. Nick's night a plate of full goodies at breakfast time. This was a warning, you better behave or else. By that time, we had already had plenty of snow, and horse sleds were common. The streets were packed and the snow was as slick as ice. Sleighing was common nearly every night. We lived up high, and it was a slope of about 4 blocks and then leveled off so we could ride our sleds for at least 7 blocks. Great sport. Some would have what we called racks. They were 2 large sleds joined by a large plank. One sled was to be used to steer. The 2 were covered with carpet. As many as 8 persons would get on and all ride down the hill together. About 3 weeks before Christmas, cookies in the shape of a cross, crescent, block, star, and triangle would be cut of cookie dough and frosted. When the frosting became hard, they were then decorated with different colored sugar and small candies. These were later put on the tree for decorations, as well as on the plate to eat. For a Christmas tree, we had, for a number of years, a large Christmas bell. This happened to be my mother's large hoop skirt. We would put evergreen slips on the rings and tallow candles in the candlesticks, which were shaped with a red ball on the bottom to balance the candle above. It was a very pretty tree, as well as a Christmas bell. Christmas Eve, we younger ones were put to bed while Santa did his work. At 7 o'clock Christmas morning, there was a lot of noise as Santa waited for us to come down quick in our flannel night clothes and stood in awe at the tree all ablaze, and Santa He was my father. In a borrowed bearskin coat, fur hat, and a grumbling voice, greeted us and then disappeared out the back door. We returned to our rooms and dressed and then came down for breakfast. The morning was spent in getting acquainted with our new gifts. In the afternoon, we always had friends and their children come and spend the afternoon, which consisted of all sitting in a row, one cracking walnuts and handing them out. In the meantime, there was a big bucket of ice cream buried outside in a snowdrift to freeze. About 4:30, it was then served with Christmas cookies. Christmas night, we went to the church for the exercises they had. There was a large tree all decorated and the tallow candles were all lit. Several men stood by with snuffers to smother any candle that went wild. The services consisted of singing by the Sunday school youngsters who had learned Silent Night and many others. And then the presents were given out. However, there was a lot of disappointment. For instance, I wrote Santa at Sunday school that I wanted a shotgun and a large pocket watch. Santa switched on me and I got a necktie and a Holy Bible. Between Christmas and New Year's, we had skating and sleigh riding and parties. I have been asked by this young generation what we did. Well, let them read my story, and that is only a small part of what we did. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And so that is the memories from John Youngmeyer. Well, now we have a recollection from Floyd Fink. Floyd Fink. It seems to me that Christmas was more exciting when we were small than it is to children today. For one thing, we weren't spoiled by having too much every day of the year. Toys were few, but appreciated. We'd hang up our stocking on Christmas Eve. One Christmas morning, we got up early to see what old Santa had brought. There were our long black stockings filled to the top with candies, assorted nuts, and fruit. There were always also toys and games as well as warm mittens that Mama had knit. This seemed to be a pretty good haul, so that night before bedtime, my brothers and I hung up our stockings again. Sure enough, the next morning, the stockings bulged fat and stiff. St. Nick, that jolly old elf, had been there, but no candy and nuts spilled out, just plain fresh white corn cobs. Papa's gray-blue twinkly eyes were very twinkly that morning. We had a pure white Eskimo dog. His eyes and his nose were as black as a fresh polished shoe. His tail curled up over his back. His hair was long and fluffy, especially around his neck, making it look larger than it really was. Snow was his name, but Snow wasn't very friendly. When you fed him, he would growl if you stayed to watch him eat or pick up his pan and carry it out of sight. He wasn't much good, except that he'd bark at anyone coming in at night. The trouble was that you couldn't always tell whether someone was coming or just another dog somewhere. One Christmas Eve, after we'd hung up our stockings, Papa said, "Why don't you stay up a little longer? You might get to see old Santa." We were really excited. We ran from window to window, listening. All at once, sleigh bells were jingling. A man was yelling for help. Snow was barking and growling. The back door burst open and in rushed Santa with old Snow dragging from the seat of his red pants. Pieces of cotton hung from his suit, and the pillow was about to slip under his jacket. Papa put Snow out, and Santa took off his mask and long white beard. This ended the Santa Claus myth. And so that is Recollections from Floyd Fink. Let's see, next I want to share a recollection that is from Mary Polson Charlton, and she has entitled it A 5-Year-Old's Christmas. Just think back to what Christmas was like when you were 5 years old and how exciting it was. Strange what small things can stick in the memory and be suddenly recalled by some chance remark. When someone asked a group recently about early Christmas memories, a Frisco passenger train leaped into my mind. Not very Christmassy? Well, for a child of 5, it seems to have been part of a memorable finish for a fine Christmas, though forgotten for decades. It was a family Christmas at Grandpa and Grandma Jackson's big hospitable farmhouse a mile north of New Albany. Our mother had taken us 3 little girls up the day before Christmas, an hour's drive by horse and buggy. That way she could help Grandma with many preparations for tomorrow, and we children could help Grandpa bring in a big cedar tree from a hillside and set it up, and all pitch in to help decorate a gay Christmas tree. We made long strings of cranberries and of popcorn, managing to break a good many popcorn grains with our stringing and saving them. You know how. And we rubbed some nice little red apples to a fine shine and carefully tied them by their stems to branches here and there. I don't believe our pioneer families ever used the lighted candles on our Christmas trees that were the custom in some places. Pioneer homes were too hard won to take that kind of chance with fire, I imagine. Our dad had stayed home in Fredonia to finish some business and to feed and milk old Spot, our generous Guernsey, and arrived on the 5:30 a.m. Frisco for breakfast on Christmas. I don't really remember much of that day's excitement, except that the second table for the children at Grandma's was always as bountiful as the first. But at going home time, the added member of the family making too many for the one-seated buggy, Dad again patronized the Frisco, and for company, he said, he took me, the youngest, with him on the train. At that time, there were 2 trains a day each way, and we came home on the one that reached Fredonia about 6:10 p.m. No one to meet us, of course, for the rest of the family were jogging along home behind Billy, our beautiful bay. So there was the mile-long walk home along dark streets from the depot, clutching a new doll in one arm and holding tightly to Papa's hand with the other hand. Never was there a more tired little girl, but also never a more proud little girl to have been chosen to keep Papa company on his long 20-minute train ride. So that is the recollections of Mary Polson Charlton from the New Albany area. Let's see. Next, I have one that was written by Doris Cantrell. And Doris Cantrell was a longtime volunteer here at the museum and really instrumental in getting things set up. So I wanted to share hers, and her memories are called A Christmas Memory. 2 Christmas Eves are vivid in my memory. The one when I was halfway between 5 and 6 and almost sure Santa Claus wasn't what I had believed, and the one I'll tell you about when I was 10. Our church in Neodesha always had their program on Christmas Eve, and the children gave the program. Every child received a present which their parents brought from home, and a net sack of candy and nuts and an orange from the church. These gifts were handed out by Santa Claus, who in that church for many years was my father. When the children came up to the platform to sing Away in a Manger, a doll was placed in a crib and the children gathered around the crib and sang. Mary was always one of the teenaged girls. This Christmas, it was different. Our brother was born November 23, and it was suggested we use him in the crib. Mama was sure her baby wouldn't fuss, and true enough, no crying he made. I, a 10-year-old, got to be Mary in a blue-dyed sheet because he was my brother. The baby was placed in the straw-filled crib, and I'll never forget how he kicked his feet and waved his hands when he looked up and saw the candlelit Christmas tree, which to me looked 40 feet tall. My 3-year-old sister and 5-year-old brother stood in front of the crib, and each time a small child reached out to touch the happy baby, my brother would whisper, "He's my baby brother." My 7-year-old sister stood by me with her classmates and sang with them all the old carols. My mother sat in the front row just in case. Daddy was behind the Christmas tree watching the candles and his children. The baby was with us one more Christmas, then died in the summer. Never again have I been so aware of the caring and the gentle love which surrounded all the Bethlehem children as the crowd adored the baby Jesus. And that is a Christmas memory from Doris Cantrell. Now I want to share one more with you, and this is really a poignant tale because it reminds me, when I read it, it reminded me of the song that is so popular at Christmas time, I'll Be Home for Christmas, and that longing for home that all of us have, and that is seems to be particularly strong in tugging at our heartstrings around the holidays. So this one is written by Bonnie Lingenfelter Carter, Bonnie Carter, and she has titled her memories, First Christmas Away from Home. We were two college girls from Fredonia, Mary Polson Charlton and I, doing some graduate work in New York. The year was 1918, and a most exciting time to be there. We'll never forget the Armistice Day celebrations. But when Christmas was approaching, it was hard to fight off homesickness, our first Christmas away from home and family. To try to forget our longing for family and holiday times at home with friends, we decided to apply for volunteer service at one of the Army canteens. We were genuinely anxious to help some lonesome boys away from home by working Christmas Day, when we thought some of the regular volunteers might not want to work. We were encouraged with a promise to call us if needed, but it turned out to be the usual, don't call us, we'll call you routine. So Christmas Day promised a rather gray outlook, despite our determination not to spend it feeling too sorry for ourselves. The gloom wasn't lifted much at breakfast at our favorite little French tea room. The place was filled with people, and we sympathized with the busy waitress as she scurried by our tables murmuring, "Good Lord, ain't none of them got homes?" Well, somehow we got through the day. I don't remember much about it in the following week, except that we made a point of getting around the city, seeing the beautiful window displays, going to some musical performances, etc. As New Year's approached, I heard from a boy from home who was in the Navy and who had been given my address. It was arranged that he would come out on New Year's Eve and bring a buddy. I called Mary, and though it wouldn't be a real date, we girls each having other boyfriends away in the service, we were glad to see someone from home. And we thought it would be nice to have male escorts and get out and see some of the New Year's Eve crowds milling around. We weren't used to expensive entertainment, so we weren't expecting the boys to spend a lot of a sailor's small pay on us. We just wanted to walk around downtown and watch the crowds. At last, they arrived at my apartment, and after greetings and introductions, flopped down onto chairs saying, "Boy, are we glad to get here." It turned out that those remarks were not to compliment us, however, but rather the comfortable chairs and quiet apartment. No leads we could drop seemed to bring out an invitation to go New Year's Eve sightseeing. Finally, somehow, knowing his family pretty well, it seemed okay for us girls to offer to stand any expense the night might produce. Oh no, it wasn't the money. It was New York. The boy from home settled it by saying, "No, sir, not for me. I want to stay right here in this chair. We came out here by subway, fought crowds all the way. I made up my mind that if there were that many people below ground in New York, I don't want to get into the crowds above ground." And so we sat and talked or listened till midnight came. No radio or TV in those days, only the bells and shouts in the neighborhood, and our oft-repeated glances at our watches let us know that New Year had dawned. And so, a gloomy Christmas and a quiet New Year's Eve came and passed. How happy we were the next year to be home for Christmas. And that brings me to the end of the Christmas memories that I want to share tonight. There are more in this book, so if you'd like to read some that I have not shared with you tonight, just stop by the museum and we'll be happy to pull out the book and let you look at it and read them. Thanks for joining us tonight. We will not have a December third Wednesday Museum After Hours, but we will take it right back up in January. And we hope that you will remember us when you're doing your Christmas shopping and come take a look at what we have to offer. And we also wish you the most happiest of Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday season. Thanks for joining us.